Mutiny on the Bounty. You may have heard of the 1935 Hollywood movie. Well, the South Pacific island of Pitcairn that gained fame from that flick is in the spotlight again. This time, though, for its disappearing population. I'm Ramy Inocencio for Asia Today. The Wall Street Journal's Daniel Stacey joins me with more from Sydney on this very interesting story that is now online. Now, Daniel, Pitcairn has just 49 residents, so why talk about this story now?
Well, Remy, they've just done what's called a diaspora survey. They had this one hope that people who'd left the island over the decades might want to come back, and they went and found hundreds of these people and surveyed them. Now, it turns out that of the 33 people that were prepared to answer their survey, only 3 wanted to come back. So the diaspora survey, disproved the theory that many on the island held, that they just had to entice some people back and the population would grow again.
Right, so all those people there, they don't necessarily want to go anywhere else. Now, who are these people who have been there for the past several decades?
Well, there was a famous mutiny on the Bounty, an English Navy ship that was coming out to Asia to try and cultivate breadfruit, and its crew mutinied. They kicked the captain and a number of his supporters off the boat on a little life raft, and then they sailed to Tahiti, kidnapped a group of women who they made their wives, and then sailed out to Pitcairn, which was a kind of a rumoured island at that point. This is 1790, so many of these areas were very barely mapped. They settled there, they burnt the Bounty and sunk it to kind of get rid of the evidence, and then they've been living there ever since. So the community is a mixture of mutineers and Tahitian ancestors. They have their own patois, which is a kind of a Pitcairner mix of old sailor-speak and Tahitian language, and they've been living in relative isolation now for, over 200 years.
Right, so clearly immigration is the only way to try to get this population back up, but in your article you say, or someone says, that most of the population, all 49 of them I suppose, are fairly xenophobic. So isn't that a bit self-defeating?
Yeah, the editor of their local newspaper, Dem Tull, made that statement, and I think the issue is that they have been a very cloistered society for a long time. Many of them admit to finding it difficult to accept outside immigration, and the diaspora survey is kind of about that. They'd hoped to bring back other Pitcairners rather than bring in people from different backgrounds to the island. But they had a really terrible sex abuse scandal 10 years ago, which has exacerbated the sort of inability to bring people back. A lot of people are now ashamed of their Pitcairner heritage. These are people who live in New Zealand and Australia mainly, and won't identify in public as Pitcairners. So the likelihood that they're going to move back is 0 to nothing.
Right. Now, what's your take? Do you think we should let Pitcairn go back to Mother Nature? I understand there's a survey that by 2045, if nothing is done, there are only going to be, 3 people left on the rocky outcrop, right?
Well, there'll be 3 left which are of working age, and the rest will be very old. And there's a big question mark around who cares for these people, how they get medical treatment when they're sick. The island is only accessible through longboats, which have to be hauled out of a giant shed, it's questionable if 3 people could even do that, so the island would no longer be accessible. So yeah, it really is facing extinction as a community, and I think ultimately a decision has to be made by the British government. This is one of their overseas territories, as to how important this island is to them and if it's of any strategic use, because as a community it really has been on life support for many decades, and there's clearly no solution at this point.
All right, such an interesting story. All right, the Wall Street Journal's Daniel Stacey giving us an eye on a part of the world that we don't often really go to, the rocky outcrop of Pitcairn. Thanks so much. For more on this, head to his Wall Street Journal article now online. I'm Ramy Inocencio for Asia Today.